Hi, I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Magazine, and this is WCM's Outdoor Hospitality Update. My co-host Mike Gast is not with us again today. He missed last week too. He's been traveling here in the mainland. He just came to visit family from Hawaii, but he told me earlier today that he's expecting to be back in Hawaii next week. So hopefully he's on the show next week. We've been kind of missing Mike. But hopefully he's having safe travels and visiting and family members he hasn't seen in a while. So my guest today is Ruben Martinez, founder of the American Glamping Association, also co-founder of Glamping Hub. And I guess Ruben, just tell us a little bit about yourself. I guess you're based out of Denver, Colorado, right? Or close?
Yeah, Ben, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. And yeah, so background is in the glamping space. So started with Glamping Hub over a decade ago
Yep.
with the idea of being able to bring the guests and the host together in the glamping space. At that point in time, nobody was really paying much attention to unique accommodations or glamping in general. So we decided to create a booking platform that would essentially bring the guests and the host together, but specifically for the unique outdoor lodging and glamping space. And then, yeah, over the years, we've also created the Glamping Association, which provides tools and resources, education, and network and community for anybody and everybody in the glamping space, whether you're an operator or investor or park owner or somebody who's just researching or a veteran. So, yeah, and I'm located in Colorado and just a little bit outside of Denver, and love to do all camping, all glamping, all outdoors things.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the Denver area a couple times in the last few years, and it's just a beautiful area, and definitely a ton of outdoor recreation opportunities in Colorado, just throughout the whole state. So I live in southern Michigan, so it's a little bit flat where I live, not as mountainous or hilly.
Yeah,
So
it's very easy to get outside and escape here, but yeah, just like you guys, we get the long winters too, and we had maybe like 2 weeks ago, we had a pretty big snowstorm too, which is really, it was 80 degrees one day, and the next day it was 9 inches of snow. So
that's
typical
yeah, that's
Colorado.
crazy. Yeah, thankfully we the snow stops here in southern Michigan usually about the beginning of March. So it doesn't go much later than that, especially here recently. But I'm not a big snow fan. But I guess you have to be a big snow fan if you live near Denver. So
Well, I'm not. Trust me, I give me the beach over the snow any day of the week. But yeah, fortunately, we're kind of far away. Grass is always greener, I guess. But
So the American Glamping Association is a little newer. I think you had mentioned to me previously it's been in existence for about 4 years. Just how has that association grown? I mean, glamping has just exploded. So I have to imagine that's definitely helped the association grow to some degree.
yeah, I mean, the purpose of the association itself was to be able to provide those, tools and network and community to anybody and everybody in the glamping space. And from it didn't matter if they were brand new to the space or veterans. People were still coming across some consistent hurdles, whether it was capital in the space, whether it was permitting, insurance, kind of anything
Yeah.
and everything that any business owner goes through. And so the idea was just to be able to help anybody and everybody get to their version of their finish line. And in the space, at the time and even now, there's not a lot of tremendous amount of resources because it can still be a new topic. Counties often don't really know how to approach or maybe handle these types of developments. And so, we're growing with the space. Glamping pre-pandemic was still growing at a very, very aggressive rate. And then as the pandemic hit, just like with all outdoor categories, it just took on a new life form as well. So So yeah, the goal of the association has always been just to kind of help anybody and everybody get to their version of the finish line, whether they're an operator or investor or insurance company or just researching. The idea is to help everybody get to where they need to go.
I know early on in the association, there was some talk about like standardization or accreditation of some kind. I guess how have you guys been working on that? Is that something you guys are still looking at, or is it, have you shifted your focus, I guess?
Yeah, we'll roll out something here sooner than later for the accreditation. I guess the best way to think about it, when we first started the association, there was a lot of calls for standardization and being able to, I mean, think about it like the hotel system where there's 3, 4, 5 stars. There was a lot of people asking us to, from a glamping hub standpoint, being able to, can we throw our weight around and maybe figure out a way to have a standardization? But, talking with the host and talking internally and, talking on the glamping hub side, it just didn't make a lot of sense to do that because we wanted to, instead of being a policing agency on either side, really
Mhm.
do what we can do to just help support and educate and instead of policing and getting people in trouble, figure out what we can do to help them solve the problem, get over the hurdle and do that. So there was early calls to do more standardization, but we made a choice early on just to be more strategic about supporting versus policing, and
Yeah.
very happy with that choice. And but that does mean that here in the near future we will be able to help with more of an accreditation process, which we'll have soon, and hopefully that will. And the accreditation process honestly really helps mostly for um, the internal businesses themselves. A lot of people are maybe raising money and they like, the capital sources like to know that these businesses are working with the association, that they're working with other people in the industry and not
Yeah.
just some kind of rogue brand new operation that doesn't know what they're doing. So that's more or less how we're looking at that standardization topic.
Yeah, yeah. I like it. I think in a previous conversations we've had, you noted how the glamping industry here in the U.S. is so much different than maybe other countries too. I mean, there's so much land, so many different types of glamping, and so that kind of, it's going to be really difficult to kind of standardize that from that aspect too. I guess exactly what glamping is changes depending on where you are, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's a big topic because how we handle outdoor hospitality in the United States is just different than how the UK does, Australia does, and one of those key items is just how every county views a campground, views an RV park, views a glamping operation completely
Mhm.
different, right? They've got different rules, different regulations, and so even to roll out a broad sweeping protocol or standardization, it'd be really tough in many different ways because of how different every state is, how different all the counties are in every single state, and how different everybody's operation is as well. There could be two different operations that are literally right next to each other in bordering counties and are widely different, right? And so you're right in that specifically with glamping, the United States, just because of the vast territory, the amount of open space, that entrepreneurial spirit as well. People have really run in several different directions with this, even campgrounds and RV parks, as they're looking at diversifying or they've thought about glamping as an option, not as a complete takeover option, but just more of a supplemental revenue stream, for
Yeah.
them. Campgrounds are not looking at this all the same either, right? Every different types of units, different types of experiences. And so it's been fun to watch. It does also make that standardization more complicated and difficult, but this is what gravitates people towards the outdoors, right? They don't want, travel isn't changing, it has changed. And people really want a unique experience. They don't want to go do the same thing every single weekend, right? And
Yeah.
what campgrounds and RV parks and glamping operations are doing is allowing for that type of diversification and unique opportunities for experiences.
You mentioned a little bit earlier the working with developers. the role that AGA plays in that. I guess you had mentioned a little bit about, local officials trying to kind of wrap their heads around what glamping is. I guess, what does the industry do to what do we need to do to kind of inform, local officials more about what glamping is? And, I know on the RV park and campground side, we suffer a little bit from a perception problem when we talk to some local officials. Some people get visions of like trailer parks and different things. I guess, how do we, as an industry, change their minds and help them understand that glamping is something that's going to bring value to their community?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And we're looking at it, and I guess there's a few things that we're doing. But even, for example, on the Glamping Hub side, we have a program where we can allow for an easier turnkey solution for people who are thinking about getting into the glamping space, but maybe feel like, hey, it's risky. I don't know what I'm doing. So there's a Develop with Glamping Hub program that allows for a really easy segue and transition into the glamping space. And so as you talk about that perception side, that helps because from even a campground or RV park owner, there's a level of feeling that they're not going in this alone. And so now, with that program from Glamping Hub, with other things that the association has done, there's a level of people feeling like, okay, I can wrap my head around how I can actually get this done. There's great financing options now that didn't exist, and through Glamping Hub and other sources as well. And now that exists where 5 years ago that was a little bit harder, to come across. So I think that's the first part. Is now internally within the industry, there's more resources, avenues forward for people to kind of get up and running and test, their market. And the second, yeah, on the county level, it's a good question. I mean, more and more of these operations are getting up and running. So now counties are starting to see this a little bit more consistently. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a clear pathway to the finish line with them.
Yeah.
And we do, I think, say, just like what you're saying, there is a perception in the glamping side of things. I think the perceptions it's complicated, right? So
Yeah.
people will go to the county and the county just can't quite wrap their head around. They said, so is it a campground, but it's not a campground? Is it RV, but it's not an RV? It's a permanent structure, but it's not. And so the hurdle that often these developments undergo is this perception of what bucket is this? Like what is this and what isn't it? And unfortunately, that has been the case for a while. It'll continue to be the case for a while, but there's more and more operations get off the ground, as more RV parks and campgrounds and hotels and bed and breakfast start to add this type of accommodation option on their property. There's just going to be an educational piece that these counties will start to figure out, what bucket this exists in and why it's a great economic benefit for their area, first and foremost. And then, second, I think there's a level of now there's more support systems through organizations all, around the space that make it feel less risky, right? For many counties, it felt, okay, what is this? I don't really know what it is or what it isn't, but now there's a lot of information, a lot more reports, a lot more data that can help support why this is a good, not only project, but economic benefit for the area.
And there's been so much data on the economic benefits. I know RVIA for the RV industry just released something that said the RVing has like $140 billion annual economic impact. And we've seen other outdoor recreation studies from like the ORR that just show the tremendous impact. And I have to imagine glamping is a fairly big player in that too. So I have to imagine when you see studies like that, it's going to help local officials make decisions too.
Yeah, data is very powerful, right? And even at this last glamping show, I think I got cornered maybe no less than 40 times with people saying, hey, when's there going to be more reporting? And hey, we need more data. And
Yeah.
for various reasons, from development, from them as operators making good decisions on types of accommodations and, unit count and conversion and transition and all that stuff. And so data is something that the industry as a whole still needs to focus more on and be better at. But the
Yeah.
data that's out there currently is powerful, and being able to use it correctly is only going to help people. But I mean, the outdoor space in many different ways, even just specifically the glamping space, I mean, hasn't been around as long as the hotels, right? So
Yeah.
hotels have very long history and robust data set and mechanisms to be able to collect data. And we are on the front end of that. But every year is getting better and better. And that will continue to be true moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I know you guys are doing an investment thing, an investment like workshop, I guess, before the glamping show this year. Just kind of give us a kind of tell us a little bit more about that and why that's so important to what you guys do at the AGA, I guess.
Yeah, so at the glamping show this year, there's going to be a few things that happen on the front end of the glamping show, which is still on the property, part of the glamping show. But last year we did the glamping basics, which is meant for anybody who's newer to the industry, really in research mode.
Yeah.
And some of the topics, at the glamping show can go, which is great, pretty in depth and in the weeds. And if you're a brand new operator, there's a level of, that can feel a little overwhelming. And
Definitely.
so this first session allows for people to just get a little bit more of a high level overview. So that's still going on. And then also, the two main hurdles in the glamping space are always going to be capital and permitting. So
Yeah.
capital, like I mentioned, Glamping Hub's doing that program for financing for hosts, which has been great and a way to dislodge some of the bottleneck in this space. But we'll continue to try and provide as many solutions in the space as possible because it's just a big hurdle. So what we're doing right now is this year we're going to have the glamping investment connection. So 6 people will be able to, or businesses will be able to pitch in front of a room full of capital providers and people who are active in the space. And we would love to be able to have 50 people pitch, but that would be a very long event. So we unfortunately have to narrow it down. So we'll have a handful of people pitching with a question and answer at the end of it. And the idea is that it really is a win-win-win all around, in that those that are looking for capital have an opportunity to present themselves in front of people who are actively looking for great opportunities to invest and to provide capital for businesses. And then also people who maybe are maybe a year behind, and maybe next year is going to be the time for them to pitch and present. They can see how people are doing it, right? They can see how it makes sense, how they're pitching, information that they're bringing. And it's really just another opportunity. And what we're really focusing on is peeling back the curtain a little bit, being able to not make the capital side of the glamping space and the outdoor space so mysterious, which it has been, right? When people start raising
Yeah.
money, it's a lot of questions. How'd you do it? What's the best way? What are you trying to
Yeah.
avoid? Really just keep the conversation active, constant, front and center. And that's the main purpose of the investment connection. But yeah, we're excited for that this year, and hoping that can, it'll be a successful event.
Is there, I have to imagine there's quite a bit of investment activity on the glamping front. Is there a bunch of investors looking to put their money in the glamping sector, looking for people to work with, maybe more now than in the past?
Yeah, good question. I mean, short answer is yes. So pre-pandemic, this was already happening. And then with the pandemic, it definitely accelerated that trend for a few different reasons. And one was that you think about even some of these larger capital providers, maybe hotel groups, the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden they've got a lot of money that they're just not going to put back into hotels because, it was a pandemic, and just hotels in general really struggled. So you have unique offerings like that in hotel groups that were looking to provide capital solutions, real estate investment groups looking
Yeah.
to diversify, And when most of these capital providers look at not only the upside of outdoor hospitality and everything outdoors, I mean, it's hard to argue for camping, RV, glamping. Everybody did really well, the last few years, and that was already happening pre-pandemic. But I think it really opened up people's eyes to not only how people want to travel, the trends in where people were going, but then also the business side of it, right? There's a very strong business case, compared to the hotel space, right? Where it's very expensive per room, permitting options. It's very large scale development. So as people started to gravitate towards the outdoors, more experiential based travel, the money started to figure out like what is going to be the best investment for their money, and glamping and kind of unique outdoor hospitality really created a strong narrative there for them. So short answer is yes, that's continuing to happen. And a good problem in the space that we have right now is that there just isn't enough. There isn't enough units available, right? The demand is still same with RVs, same with campgrounds. There's just not enough supply out there for the demand that continues to grow. It's a good problem, but it's still a problem that needs to be fixed. So, we kind of unofficially dubbed 2022 as this year of development, which is held true. I mean, every day, every week, every month, all sorts of news of different investment, different developments. And so we'll see what happens here in 2023. But yeah, the very strong investment year for the outdoors as a whole.
Do you on the RV park and campground side, we talk about the lack of sites, and I mean they're just building a ton of sites. I mean, like you mentioned, we see stories almost every day about new developments, expansions, whatever. But it seems like they're just kind of playing catch up at this moment. Is the glamping industry playing a little bit of catch up on the sites, or is there a light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, where you're going to be able to meet that demand?
Yeah, no, still the demand is outstripping the supply that's there. I think similar to most development, there's a significant increase in development, but that didn't necessarily mean, for example, that permitting got easier, right? So as more and more investment capital expansion started to happen, it did expose some of the difficulties in the space, such as permitting. It didn't derail the development. It just kind of showed, okay, just because we want to be able to put 20 domes here on this property doesn't necessarily mean that the county knows exactly how to do that, right? And that's something that we're constantly educated and working towards, because we obviously want to dislodge that. But yeah, there's still a lot of development going on. Some people were able to get up really quickly for a host of reasons. Some they fell behind for a host of reasons. Some are right on time. And even with that speed and development, you still have this other force of, glamping in particular really becomes this gateway to the outdoors. Right? There's a large subset of people who are used to going to hotels, for example, where the last 2 years has really shaken that up and it's kind of forced them to ask themselves questions of, do I really want to do this kind of normal hotel stay, or do I want to do something different? And the reality is that subset of travelers too, them going and going to go sleep on the ground and go camping isn't always realistic, right? Like me and my family, we go camping a bunch of times during the summer. We go glamping as well. But for many families who are maybe used to that hotel stay, going out there and asking them to do that is a little bit of a stretch. So glamping has become this gateway where then they realize, oh yeah, I mean, Mother Nature, I love being able to be outdoors and do this. And then they start getting more into RVs, more into camping and things like that. And so I think that's been an important mix too, as well. But yeah, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think people are just, especially the new people are just kind of really exploring what it looks like, the camping and glamping lifestyle. So it'll be interesting to see how they progress along that path, as they explore more. So
Right,
definitely.
which everybody in that scenario, everybody wins, right? When we can
Yeah.
get more people outside who maybe weren't used to, or it wasn't as accessible to them one way or the other, it's definitely that trickle effect where, they go camping for the first time, then they eventually get an RV, or they eventually go glamping, or vice versa. They go glamping for the first time, and then, they start bringing their more friends and family, camping in RV. So it really is a trickle down effect one way or the other, and it's just a win for everybody by getting more people outside.
Yeah. Yeah. We did have a question from an audience member, Joe Moore. He's on the National Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds Board of Directors, and he's a consultant for RV parks and campgrounds. But he asked, I recommend 10% of total sites. Do you have a recommendation on a percentage of glamping sites, primarily in the RV park setting? So I guess he's asking, for RV park and campgrounds, how many sites should be glamping sites, I guess.
Good question. I think there was as we talked about perceptions earlier, I think there was a perception that people, that campers and RVs and glampers all had to be separate. We've seen this time and time again over the last several years that that's just not true. There's countless examples of mixed usage for unit types, and everything flowing very well together. For an exact percentage, I mean, I know this is not necessarily a fair answer, but we use this a lot in our space. It depends, right? I mean, for some people, adding glamping to their park can be a big risk to them, right?
Yeah.
They know RVs, they know camping, they just don't know glamping. And to ask them to do 50% could be high risk, right? It's not a pad, it's not a plug-in, glamping operation. There's a little bit more, you got furniture in the unit and the decking and things like that, but you look at it on the other end too, the returns can make a lot of sense for maybe a park that is underperforming, right? Maybe they haven't had a tremendous amount of investment into the park, and they've got to make a decision on, all right, for this next round of investment, what are we going to do? Right. And so we always advocate the phased in approach. So being able to start with a meaningful amount that allows for you to get more information. So whether that's 5% or 10% or a handful of units, and test it out, right? Because what we want to avoid is somebody spending, a significant amount at their first go around, and then maybe feeling like they made the wrong unit choice, or the wrong placement in the park, or they didn't think of things such as seasonality or add-on amenities. So what we see most common is just a phased in approach, where you can start small with that 5% or 10% or whatever it might be for them, and then figure out if there's a pathway forward, because maybe the right mix for people is a 60-40, right? Where 40% is more a glamping option. And then it also depends on who you're trying to attract, right? There's a level of demographic and usage cases where somebody who wants to spend, 150 to 250 a night on a glamping unit is going to be different than somebody who, maybe just wants to go camping for one night or 2 nights, right? And it could be the same person, but at the same time, it's considerations on who you're trying to attract. What does that do for the property as a whole? Not put it in a situation where you're risking too much up front. And then also gives yourself a time, let it run for a season, learn, figure out what people are saying about it as well, because the uniqueness of every type of property, what works well for a property in market A may not work well at all for another market and property B, right? And so you have to be able to see what the market is telling you, if that makes sense. But I would probably think you're even safer to go up closer to 30%. We're seeing more and more people. We're not seeing a lot of, obviously, takeovers where at a park system, all of a sudden it goes from 20 to 50 to 70 to 100% is all glamping. It tends to still be supplemental.
Yeah. And is glamping just the accommodation unit, or does glamping entail more than just the accommodation unit? So can I just put a yurt out there and it's glamping, or does it have to have more of an experience?
Yeah, I think, a few things to consider there. One would be, just like camping, most in RVs, most people are not going to the sites and then just being in their unit all day long, right? They're
Yeah.
fishing or they're hiking or they're biking or they're, sitting around the campfire and things like that. So the unit is important, but the surrounding area is just as important, if not more important. And so, yeah, you want to have a level of comfort and you want to have some of the internal amenities, but what's more important is the view, the access to nature, the access to trails or water, or what people are doing when they're really there on site. And so I think that's a key consideration, especially for, the reality, the price point for many glamping operations is obviously more than just a camping site, right? And so there are certain expectations that people need to be aware of, right? But that can be, there's some simplistic execution to that in the unit itself, and then simplistic execution to the unit right outside. So amenities as simple as, great area for people to eat outside, a picnic table, a fire pit, the view, a little bit of privacy, things like that.
Yeah, I think you had one of the more thorough definitions of glamping I've heard in a previous conversation. You mentioned, distinctive to two or three categories. One, like direct
Yeah.
access to nature. You have the uniqueness, and then the comfort. Because I tent camp. I don't know, Ruben. You mentioned camping. Do you tent camp or do you have an RV?
I would do both. So we do tent
Okay.
camping and then we got a pop up.
So I don't have a pop-up. A pop-up would be considered glamping to me, probably. I sleep on the ground. I
Yep.
don't know. I'm not very picky, but so I guess to some degree, glamping is kind of a personal preference for the camper too, right? What they consider glamping to be, but you still need that access to nature, the comfort, and kind of the uniqueness, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's great about the outdoors as a whole is that there's something for everybody,
Yeah,
right? And there really is a process to it where, maybe people who start, tent camping eventually get maybe a pop up, maybe eventually, then and everybody can go at the same time, or maybe, the retired parents need to go stay in the yurt, right? But then, the younger parents have a pop up, and then maybe the younger cousins or whoever's, tent camping are all mixed up, whatever it might be. There's something for everybody, which I think is an important part. And in the categories of glamping too, that's similar, right? I mean, many glamping operations are off grid. There's no water, there's no electric, it's no sewer, no septic, nothing like that, right? And there are glamping operations that are obviously completely the opposite, that have all of the above.
yeah,
So for glamping in general, I mean, what we think is important is that it's very clear to the user what they're getting and what they're not getting, right?
yeah,
Because being able to be outside, be in Mother Nature, no internet, no water, no electricity, nothing, is great but making sure people know that that's what they're getting, right?
yeah,
And vice versa. And so we're kind of letting, there was some also a call in a way for people telling us, hey, we need to standardize what is glamping and what isn't. But the reality is that the reason why it's been increasing in popularity and investment and the way that people are now, it's not the only way that they travel, but it's now one way that is a tool in their belt, or an arrow in their quiver, that maybe it wasn't 5 years ago, is that there is that level of uniqueness and differentiation between property. And people have been very creative in that. It's a very kind of an American spirit of entrepreneurial endeavors, and not just being in one category of it's a bell tent, that's it, nothing else is glamping.
yeah.
People are starting to push the envelope and ask questions, and have unique executions to it. And I think it's only good for glamping, and it's only good for the outdoor space as a whole.
Yeah, it's amazing what some of these glamping operators are doing. Just with the shipping containers, I mean the yurts, the tree houses. I've seen some very beautiful treehouse resorts or parks. It's just amazing what they're coming up with, the creativity. So that's been definitely been interesting to watch in the glamping industry. Um, I know on the RV park and campground side, we've seen some consolidation, bigger developers or investment groups coming in and buying out, parks. I guess, is that something you see in the glamping industry, like a consolidation over the next few years? I guess, what does the next few years hold for the glamping industry?
No, that's a good question. And, the RV industry and the camping industry has obviously been around a lot longer than the glamping industry. But that's next, definitely. There's a lot of small, medium, large operations that's just going to be the pathway that they go down.
Yeah.
There really hasn't been significant consolidation in the space, but there will be. There's been some small scale consolidation. And I think from a capital side, investment side, people are still, waiting for a few more kind of dominoes to fall, if you will. But it's already happening in certain ways. There's already people who are, being able to think through how to be more horizontal than vertical in ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're going to see more and more and more of it. And we've seen some, but I think we're just at the beginning stages of that consolidation. And yeah, there's going to be a lot, a lot new here moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's just been amazing. All the investment groups, especially on the RV park and campground side, that are coming in and buying multiple parks. I think we just featured one last week on our website. They bought 10 parks and they just celebrated their 1 year anniversary. So, I mean, it's just been, that seems
Yeah.
crazy. When I read it, I was like, that's a lot of parks in 1 year. But it's like, wow. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the glamping end as well. I know some people like Timberline Glamping are trying out the franchise model. So that seems to be, that's interesting as well. I guess on the public park side, real quickly, we got to wrap up here soon. On the public park side, we're noticing groups like Timberline, for instance, start working with public parks and integrating kind of those glamping sites. Do you see more public like facilities jumping into glamping and adding like tents and yurts and trying to do more on that end?
Yeah, we'll definitely see more of that. It makes it's going to continue to make sense, on the public side, where what we see most common is underperforming campgrounds, right? Every county, every city, every state has a budget, right? And
Yeah.
they can't, as much as they would like to have unlimited budget for each one of their parks, they end up having to compromise and make cuts and sacrifices. And what's consistent is every state, every county, every local area ends up having to compromise and have two or three, or however many campgrounds or spots or areas, that public sites that they love. They just gotta, they just can't reinvest back into it. And so there, it does in not in every case, but in many cases, it really is a win-win there, because the state or the public site gets to be kept within that umbrella. That state level or whoever it might be gets to have an additional revenue stream that comes in without them having to make that investment. And then that private company, gets to have a land for a land lease that makes sense for them. So it makes a lot of sense. Not for every property, not for every county, not for every campground, but we'll see more and more in that. And just like with everything in any type of development, there's pluses and minuses to each strategy. And that's no different, right? There's some really great things about that strategy, and there's also some hurdles with that strategy. But yeah, I don't think that strategy is going to go away. And it's something that in many cases makes perfect sense for that type of partnership.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I think that's about everything I had. I didn't want to drill you too much, Ruben. So thanks for taking the time to come on. I was gonna I just put the link up for the American Glamping Association for people who want more information. And of course, you're doing that investment connection at the beginning, at the day before the Glamping Show USA kicks off, which is also another great glamping event. it's amazing how quickly that show's kind of grown. I think
Mhm.
they had over 1,000 people last year walk through. So, and all the units you get to see at the show are just incredible.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, Ruben, you'll be there, right?
Oh yeah, I'll be there. It'd be good to see you again in person.
Yeah, yeah. So, but thanks again for coming on and for taking a little bit of time to talk about glamping and the association. So,
Anytime, anytime.
uh,
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
yeah. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the week and enjoys the summer weather wherever you're at. Hopefully, it's getting warmer. So, bye everyone.